Chilling tales for dark nights.
Knuckle Supper. Written by Drew Stepek. Performed here by Jason Hill. Chapter 8. Serpents. Why are we here? Bait asked. Her eyes were opened wide with fear and she was breathing like she had just finished a marathon. We were told to wait just outside the Battlesnake's compound after being shanghaied outside of Club Thirst by baby snakes and Dez. Yeah, RJ. Please share. Dez, I don't want to have this conversation again. What in the hell did you say to Copperhead? Couldn't this have waited? I talked to him as instructed by you. I told him that you wanted to meet with Cobra. No matter how lame I think you're being, I'm not going to let you show up here unannounced or without me. If I wanted you dead this second, then maybe I should have sent you here alone. Whatever that means. Thanks, though. I need your anorexic ass to back me up against a horde of monstrous black guys. Is your plan to beat them with your purse? Dez's mouth dropped as if my tone urinated in his face. Is it possible that he was dumb enough to think he was doing me a favor? I can tell you this much. Cobra ain't happy about this at all. Dez put a cigarette out on his tongue. You can't push him around like you do to me. Back to me? Bait shoved herself between the two of us. Why are we doing this, RJ? It's hard to explain. Remember when you were asking about elders? So, there are elders? Des huffed. Yeah, you little whore. A bunch of mass-murdering Rasta elders. Des, shut the fuck up. Look, Bait, I described these guys to you before. They are kinda like the lead gang. They set up the territories. They control the money, the drugs, and the action. I pushed Bait aside. As for you, Dez, I hope to Christ your little followers aren't getting all diarrhea-mouthed about what's going on in Culver City. Dez snarked, discrediting my accusations. The Battlesnake's compound was an old string of row houses in downtown LA that they had gutted and connected. They used to have a warehouse close to Koreatown, but someone burned that down along with a couple of members. The cops never bothered them because King Cobra had allegedly made a deal with them to keep traditional Los Angeles bangers and other undesirables off the streets. In that sense, they were lucky. I suppose the cops had been convinced that at one point they could be turned and become eternal. Sometimes humans are so dumb. But to the Snake's credit, they were in charge. I hated dealing with the Battlesnakes, especially face-to-face. Usually, Dez and Copperhead, Cobra's vice principal, figured out all the details of what we owed and where we were allowed to hunt. Now it was the three of us against them. Seeing as how I was always nervous around these jokers, I wished a little muscle like Tahoe were with us. I was pissed off at him, too. His fucking big-ass mouth, that was most likely filled with food, was the reason we were in this predicament to begin with. This is bad, RJ. Then why did you do it? Quit being melodramatic. You're making the kid nervous. Besides, the stealing of drugs was your idea, genius. I could swear that you're the one who's nervous. Just avoid any conversation about the habit. The last thing we want to do is set off any alarms or remind these assholes about that. You think I don't remember? Are you nuts? I grabbed Dez by the hair and knocked on the door 3 times with his head. Thank you, I added. Nice, RJ, Dez said, rubbing his forehead. Bait tugged on my shirt sleeve. What's the habit? Oh, you haven't told her. Dez fluffed Bait's hair around like she was an infant. Don't worry. You'll find out soon enough, you little fucking whore. Bate scrunched her face and walloped Des in the nuts with her knee. He buckled over slightly and grabbed a wrench from the front pocket of his girly jeans. "What the fuck?" Des whispered. "You are so dead, little whore." I grabbed the wrench from his hand and snapped his wrist backwards. I whispered, "Why the hell did you bring a weapon, dude? Do you know how stupid that is? There are 3 of us here. 2 junkies and 1 bait. There are over 30 of these guys." I threw the wrench across the open lot so that it was out of the line of floodlights that surrounded the compound. Bait chimed in, wanting to be a part of the conversation. All this talk about the habit, whatever that is making me hungry. I want a hamburger from the habit. What is wrong with both of you? Jesus Christ, stop! This isn't a joke. What are you looking at, you faggot? Bate got up toward Dez's chest. He looked down at her and stared, licking his lips. Bate, take this and stop. I handed her the iPod she gave me. She held the iPod back toward me and pinched her nose. I don't like your music. I'm serious now. These guys aren't like the Knucklers, and they aren't like Eldritch. Reluctantly, she did what she was told. The door to the compound flew open. All carrying Tech 9s, Copperhead and 2 other snakes came out and began patting us down. Sorry about these days. But you know the deal, he said. Copperhead was tall and gangly, with his short, awful orange-colored dreads sticking up everywhere. He looked like a palm tree. You could barely see his eyes because they were always beet red and filled with pot and blood. Des had gone through a big stoner period. That's when they started hanging out. Is this the whore, Des? He put his hand under Bates' chin and directed it towards his eyes. Don't look like much. KC is not gonna be happy. I stood there, nervous, hoping Bate didn't think it was a good time to make one of her stupid faces. Luckily, she seemed too frightened. Des tried to smooth things out before they got miserable right out of the gate. That's her, cop. What kind of mood is KC in? The 2 guards finished patting me down. Copperhead shot me a wink. Ah, Jay. What's up, cop? Seemed like we already been through this, eh, RJ? Come on. The stinkweed permanently on his breath swirled around. It made me want to vomit. Took off them shoes, Knuckles. I tapped Bate on the shoulder and signaled for her to ditch her boots. She mouthed, "Why?" I made a fist, insisted with my eyes, and snarled. Reluctant, she took them off. Her socks had skulls on them. Jesus. We followed Copperhead through the sparkling gold of the main foyer. Paintings of King Cobra covered the walls, and throne-type chairs shaped like snakes materialized every few steps. Peter Tosh's music quietly filled the foyer halls like waiting room music. Battle snakes, who seemed to get bigger and blacker the further we made it through, whispered to each other and laughed. I made out Knucklers, the Habit, Crackers, and punk asses. Yeah, I wasn't loved inside the Battlesnake's compound. We reached the center of 2 marble staircases that were woven like snakes into the main chamber. Copperhead led us to the very back of the room that looked too big to be inside the compound at all. Only one of the snake henchmen was present. Sit down, King Cobra commanded. We obliged. A massive being, he stood close to 7 feet. He never wore a shirt when I saw him, so he could show off how shredded his body was. If his mind was as big as his body, I'd be much more uncomfortable around him. It seemed obvious to me that anyone that would name a gang Battle Snakes was not the brightest businessman in the world. Then again, I was told he started the gang from scratch in the late 70s. I wouldn't call the guy a visionary, but the Battle Snakes, without a doubt, were the first of their kind. In front of King Cobra was a girl strapped down securely in a steel chair. Her mouth was gagged, and although she tried to flinch loose, it was pretty obvious they had already beaten the resistance out of her. I grabbed Bait and whispered, "Don't watch this." Copperhead moved behind Bait, ripped out the earbuds, and held her head straight forward toward King Cobra's throne. Bait watched. She had no choice. From a golden bowl next to his throne, King Cobra plucked out an enormous bud. He picked the leaves off the stem with his manicured fingers, creating 2 perfectly even balls. His voice knocked off the walls of the throne room, deep and loud enough to suspect that he was wearing a microphone. "This is good bud, huh, Cop?" "It's sticky," Cop answered. "Some of them finks got a nice grow house." The victim shook as King Cobra packed the bud into both of her bottom eyelids. The song Mystic Man by Tosh intensified as Copperhead used a remote control to increase the volume. Cobra sang along. He thought he was a mystic man. He bobbed his head back and forth, his dreads catching the light of the red, yellow, and green track lighting above him. Don't know if the modern vampire's propensity to stage a show was in the lack of blood or if it was tribal. I thought it was dumb. Loudly he sang, "I don't take no heroin, no. It was a direct dig at the knucklers. Sure, he claimed he didn't do anything besides smoking bud, but he sure wasn't afraid to sell those other drugs. Like most criminals who try to justify their actions, Cobra was a hypocrite. The girl in the chair blinked to get the bud out of her eyes that was packed in there so tightly that they looked like the cheeks of a chipmunk filled with nuts. She tried to cry, but the herb blocked her tear ducts. Cobra continued to bob his head, extending the performance, making it more effective than his typical daily bud ritual. From behind his kingly throne, he grabbed a 2-foot glass cylinder. One end of it was comfortably shaped and cushioned to fit flawlessly around his mouth. The other circular end of the pipe was tipped with a sharp steel blade. Without losing the rhythm of Tosh, he brought the modified bong up behind his head and unceremoniously buried it directly into the top of the girl's skull. Bait flinched as blood shot out of the victim's head, covering Cobra's face. Copperhead held her steady as he snickered and blew smoke from his nostrils into her eyes. King Cobra, still dancing with himself, placed his lips inside the mouthpiece and grabbed the girl's neck. Then, from his lap, he produced a blowtorch, fired it up, and sent the flame right into the eyes. Charred blood streamed from the eye but stopped short of dropping on her shoulder because it congealed from the heat and built up like dry cement on her cheeks. The girl's body went into a seizure. Smoke puffed from her sightless sockets as Cobra sucked on the bong. The girl's cornea melted, followed by her iris and then her pupil. The bubbling of the blood in her brain spun out of control in cadence with Tosh. After a giant bong load, Cobra extracted the glass apparatus from his victim's head, creating a slurp and crackle as the suction was released from the skull. Pointing the pipe upward like a bugle, he sucked down all the smoke. The girl's head fell forward, revealing an atrocious gash in her skull. A smoggy twirl of marijuana smoke floated from the noodle hole all the way to the ceiling. Copperhead was using his fingers to try to pry Bates' eyes open as if she were being brainwashed. She was crying, her tears spilling over his fingers. Cobra stood up from his throne, put his arms over his head, and kicked the victim's chair over in front of him. "Reynolds, as I live and breathe, you got big-ass balls." After peacefully shaking hands with Dez, Cobra told him and Copperhead to leave the room. Cobra handed Copperhead the remote control after he turned the music down. I'm sure Dez and Copper had business transactions to talk about anyway. The business was how to scare the shit out of me on Halloween. and the price was my life. Bait stared at Cobra. She was about a third his size. Cobra ran his many ringed fingers through Bait's hair. "This is the one." He grabbed Bait by the back of the neck. The only noise she made was the nervous tapping of her shoes on the floor. She's no good to me. Her head is too small. He added. "Hear me out," I started. Unlike Copperhead, Cobra elected against the fake Jamaican accent. Nonetheless, every word that came out of his mouth was painfully direct. "Before you say something you're going to regret, answer me this question. Why in the fucking world would you think I'd let this happen? Do you know what I lost last time you wanted to bring a little white bitch around?" He kicked over my chair and planted his bare foot into my neck. He grappled Bait's head and lifted her up like a moppet. She dangled in the air. "Casey, she's just a dumb hooker who's already seen the operation. Look how small she is. She can't do anything to any of us." "Really, RJ? Just like the habit." "Sir, not the time, Bait." The words barely escaped my lips. My trachea nearly crushed under King Cobra's foot. Cobra pulled her towards him and coughed in her face. "RJ, tell her to shut the fuck up if she doesn't want to die right now." He lifted his foot from my throat. "Bait, shut up." "Sir," she continued. "What's the habit?" Her stomach growled. "I'm kinda hungry. Can you get habit burgers delivered here?" Meanwhile, I was on the floor, approaching a pant leg full of shit. Cobra returned his foot and almost smashed my throat. Then, he chuckled and released his foot again. He lowered Bait to the floor. "What the shit is this, Reynolds? Is this some kind of joke? Get up." Doing what I was told, I stood up and cracked my neck. I heard Des and Copperhead laughing in the shadows of the musty room. "Get out of here, motherfuckers!" Copperhead bellowed. He plucked the chair up off the ground and shoved me into the seat. He picked up the other chair next to it and swept Bait into it. "Let me tell you a story, little white whore. The habit almost destroyed everything that I built. She was another white bitch who my butler friend Reynolds here brought to me just like this. I need help getting my fix, he said. We need a human on our team, he cried. I'm a lazy, junky motherfucking idiot, he pleaded. You know what happened when I allowed this bitch in? She fucking torched my home and killed a bunch of my brothers. What did Reynolds get out of it? A new house. He smacked me in the face. Isn't that what happened, Reynolds? Because you wanted to get your dick inside of a human and a roof over your head. You cost me a lot of money. And a lot of friends. In my defense, Cobra raised his finger to my face. Don't. He knelt down to Bait, not taking his finger out of my face. Your friend Reynolds here didn't understand that there are people who want to destroy this operation and my way of life. You see, this pussy ass would rather see himself in charge of LA than me. You're a big man, aren't you, Reynolds? Don't be mistaken, little girl. Reynolds will never be in charge of anything more than a small bunch of disgusting junkies because he makes fucked up mistakes. He also fails to recognize that changes are happening all around us. He doesn't listen to anyone but the junkie voices in his head. So, she hesitated. Can I have something to eat? Defeated, Cobra stretched his frame upright. I'll let you do this, Reynolds. If anything goes wrong, anything at all, you are one dead motherfucking knuckler. We're watching you. Time stood still for a second, and I wished that being a vampire endowed me with the gift of time travel. That duffel bag full of heroin never would have seen the inside of my house. Fuck, Des said to Copperhead from the shadows. Bitch, get the fuck in here and bring that queer ass with you. Des and Copperhead shuffled into the room. You motherfuckers want to get us something to eat? Get some macaroni and cheese, bitch, Cobra shouted as he kicked at the leg of another snake. He pointed to Bait. That little bitch can't eat this shit. He opened his arms to display his feast. Up and down the table were gold serving dishes piled high with prime cuts of fresh humans. Some of the food was cooked to his liking, but most of it was raw and drenched in blood. One thing I never said about Cobra was that he wasn't a gracious host. That was, at least if you weren't the one on the menu. Bait held up a fried human finger and dipped it in some barbecue sauce. Can I try this? It looks like a chicken nugget. I seized the appetizer from her and crunched into it. I said, praising the light batter. No nails. What are you talking about, nails? I make sure the nails are taken out. He gaped at Copperhead, who was next to Des at the opposite end of the large black lacquer reception table. Unsuspecting, they laughed it up as Bait gnawed on small portions of drenched liver. Cobra sang out, Isn't that right, Copper? Copperhead didn't ignore the question, but he didn't acknowledge it either. It seemed there was just as much dissension within the Battlesnakes compound as there was within the Knuckler garage. King Cobra continued. That son of a bitch used to run my kitchen, talking about reading cookbooks and watching the Food Network and shit. About 2 months ago, I'm eating this piece of meat that is stuffed with these round things that bulged out of the top. What's in there? I asked him. Try it out to like it, he says. So, not thinking, I bit into it. Copperhead hid his face behind the large candelabra that separated the authority from the peons. Dez's nudging and chuckling ended. He knew better than to coax the volleying between the two. Frankly, Des was probably just as surprised as I was that things were going so well between Cobra and I that he didn't want to unintentionally mess up our peace mission. He was probably just as surprised that Bait was still among us. Not knowing the outcome of the story, but not necessarily wanting to further Copperhead's unease, even though he sent out his boys to pick me up at Club Thirst, I tried to put a freeze on the conversation. Well, I'm a pretty bad cook too. Rejecting my attempt to change topics, Cobra pointed his carving knife directly at Copperhead's cock. After I take a bite, this motherfucker says, "It's testicles and ovaries." With the memory of his humiliation still fresh, Cobra flipped the knife up and caught it blade side. Without missing a beat, he slung the blade at Copperhead. Unfortunately, he missed. Not so unfortunately, he caused Copper to clumsily dump his plate all over his lap and splash it on Des. The big man sneered. That's the problem with these young ones, Reynolds. They have no respect, and they're into all sorts of wild-ass silly shit. I know what you mean, I said. He gripped my shoulder. Oh, I bet your boy hands are full with those little shits, and now with this little whore. You practically got a goddamn orphanage over there. Confessing without thinking, I blurted out. Oh, I know. A few months ago, Des mauled these 2 cops and then left them in an alley. He left them to be found like they were butt-fucking. Across the table, Des's face tensed up. His white face became whiter, and he looked to be having difficulty swallowing his food. I realized the grave mistake my mouth had made as I saw the horror in Dez's eyes. I tried to suck it into my body to drop it through my sphincter, where the rest of my insides were currently in a holding pattern to be delivered out of my body. It was as if I was a ventriloquist dummy being controlled by a blabbermouth. In my attempt to gain acceptance, I led us all into a conversation that I specifically told Dez not to bring up. Cobra leaned on the table, using both his forearms as support. He grabbed the stem of his chalice full of blood between his pinky and his second-to-last finger.
Oh, really?
He twirled the cup.
And these were the cops that the BBP was snitching to. Correct?
He seemed exceedingly relaxed.
The reason I know about this is because I read it on the front page of the goddamn LA Times.
I read it too. Dez checked in to defend his actions. The cops thought it was a gang slaying. Cobra hurled his chalice at Dez, accidentally pegging Copperhead in the face.
Do you know how stupid you sound? What are the battle snakes? What are the knuckleheads?
Gangs? Bate answered.
Shut up, whore!
Dez hissed. The cops thought it was a real gang. Cobra shot to his feet.
Are you saying that we're...
He spun his finger around the room.
Not real gangs, motherfucker?
No, Dez stammered. It's, just that they figured it's like the Crips and the Bloods. The gargantuan snake leader started pacing back and forth, waiting for Dez to continue his shoveling. As far as I could tell, we had both made it about 5 feet and 11 inches towards 6 feet under. The visibility out of our graves was becoming more and more blurry as they filled with dirt. In a last-ditch attempt to defuse the situation, I said, KC, seriously, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Stupid kid, right? He stopped marching and closed his eyes.
You brought it up, Reynolds. You all wonder why you fucking work for me. But none of you listen to me.
Bate tugged on my sleeve. Elders? She whispered.
Shut her up, Reynolds.
Taking the advice of the butcher who was about to kill me, I shoved a human finger in Bates' mouth. Be quiet. Cobra, I'm sorry. I got carried away. Dez apologized. You know how ashamed parents feel when their kids are running around and screaming in an expensive restaurant? That's how I felt. Like the a-hole dad who wished he had worn a rubber. Cobra soared across the room, touching down on Dez and burying him backward on his seat, which broke into kindle on his back and ass.
Carried away, little boy. Carried away. Motherfucker, just like all of you, you Tahoe, Pico, and that fucking habit, bitch. I'll wait for you all to fuck up and let your guard down. You're not doing the battle snakes and me any favors. All you do is your lowly job, being my bitches. You are especially a nobody.
Feeling Cobra's impending wrath, Copperhead began inching away from the table. Where the fuck do you think you're going? Cobra panned over to him and coaxed him back to the table with his all-authoritative finger.
We're going to play a little game here, boys.
Cobra flipped Dez over, grabbing him as if he was preparing for a high school wrestling match. He steadied Dez in a doggy-style position. As Copperhead moved like a slug toward the scene, Cobra reached up, threw him on Dez's back, taking his position.
Hold him tightly. Dez, pull your pants down.
Twitching from fright, Dez did as he was told.
Good. See, boy, you can do as you're told. Copper, rub his body and kiss his neck.
Scared and twitchy, Copperhead submitted. I wanted to get up and stop the demonstration, but my hands were pretty much tied down by my pussy when it came to Cobra. "Hey, Egon," Cobra said to the battlesnake who came in undetected to deliver Bait a bowl of mac and cheese. "Go get my new camera." Cobra then wedged his size 22 foot between Copperhead's shoulder blades and dragged it down to his tailbone. "Move, motherfucker," he barked. Copperhead complied like this was a reoccurring role for him. He started dry-humping Dez. I couldn't see Dez's face, but I could hear his disgusted snorts and whimpers. Bait started chowing down, uninterested in anything besides her mac and cheese. Thankfully, she was at a loss for words. Egon rushed back into the dining hall with a camera. Cobra took his foot off Copperhead, grabbed the camera, and began shouting directions. "Come on, motherfuckers, you show me how much you love each other." I got up and mouthed, "Stay," to Bait. "Sit down, Reynolds. Enjoy the show." His amusement was extenuated by tee-hees and hiss-like cackles. "Have you ever seen them shoot a porno out in Chatsworth?" No," I mumbled as I backstepped to my chair. Cobra started snapping pictures, even went as far as to alter his voice to that of a cliched flamboyant fashion photographer. "More action, more love. Be sexy for the camera. Be sexy for me." He kicked Dez in the ribs. "Where's your passion, motherfucker?" Dez kept quiet. "Make some noise," Cobra continued, transposing his voice back to its original blood-curdling strength. Almost as if that one sentence triggered a bad memory with her, Bait put down her fork, pushed out her chair, and stared silently at the ground between her legs. "Come on, bitches, make some noise." With no other option, Dez and Copperhead moaned and groaned, caressed and made sexy eyes at each other. "Louder!" They complied again. No one in the room was laughing or having a good time other than Cobra. As a matter of fact, it was almost as painfully uncomfortable for the spectators as it was for Dez and Copperhead. With a thunderous boom from his bare feet, Cobra grabbed Copperhead and launched him off of Dez's back, and then hopped into a huddle stance over Dez. "Now, what were you saying about real gangs, motherfucker?" Shame clogged Dez's throat. I'm sorry. I never know what I'm saying or doing. I'm too fucked up on drugs all the time. "You're damn right, Knuckler. You don't know jack or shit." Cobra pressed the camera against Dez's cheek and snapped one last picture. The light agitated him. Bloody tears ran down his face. In large doses and close to the skin, artificial light can still be hurtful to people with photophobia. Cobra offered his hand to help him. "Get up." Dez accepted the help and got up from the banquet room floor. He looked around as he pulled up his pants. Cobra helped him and then rubbed salt in his wounds by pulling the pants so far up that it gave Dez a wedgie. Then, being the host of the night, he swung a new chair under Dez's ass and sat him down. Copperhead walked back to his seat and sat down, quiet as a mouse. Bait, on the other hand, continued looking at the floor. I snapped my fingers at her, announcing the end and hopefully not the intermission to Cobra's twisted program. She returned to her mac and cheese. On the way back to his roost at the head of the table next to me, Cobra handed Egon the camera. "Go put these on my computer." He looked over to me. "And email them to my good friend Reynolds." "What's his email?" Egon asked. "Does it really fucking matter?" Cobra fumed, causing poor Egon to lose his balance and almost drop the camera. Then, as if his show had given him the endorphins of running 10 miles, Cobra sat back down and sucked the meat off a human finger. "Now, Reynolds, Where were we? I said nothing.
Oh yeah. So, this motherfucker.
Cobra pointed to a distressed copperhead who was as still as an ice sculpture, erase-faced behind the table's centerpiece.
Since he served me some motherfucker's balls... Wait, let him tell you. Hey, Copper. What do you do in the kitchen now?
Copperhead's slit-stoned eyes snuck around the candles.
I wash the dishes. That's right, bitch. You see, Reynolds, it doesn't take much to get demoted around here.
He slapped me on the shoulder again.
So take away whatever you want from tonight. It's not going to take you much more of these mistakes to get deaded out there.
Trying to act focused on the meal, yet clearly understanding the conditions of our new agreement, I said, I hear you.
You know what's still a little funny and confusing to me about that night you and that jackass were sent to kill that snitch? Before, you made front-page headlines for icing 2 decorated cops.
Shit, I thought. He knew. He cleared his throat.
Where in the fuck is my cocaine?
Trying not to reveal my tell and be an unconvincing liar, I simply said, wasn't any coke there, dude. Like we were playing poker, Cobra read my face for any abnormalities. Luckily for me, I was telling the truth. There wasn't any coke there that night. I wished my brain had told my heart that, though, because it was thumping so hard I could feel it inside my earlobes.
Yeah, that's what I figured, because that pussy,
he pointed at Dez,
told that pussy,
he panned over to Copperhead,
that there wasn't any coke. The thing is, Reynolds, the BBPs were expecting 50 pounds or so of yayo. So, not only did your fucking dumb knuckler show raise some eyebrows to my business, I'm also out a bunch of money.
Rather than state what everyone else in the room was thinking about the fantasy cocaine, I elected to simply state, we were sent there by Linwood Perry to kill a snitch and some cops. There was never any talk about recovering and bringing back any coke at all. I got a little bold. We did everyone a favor, and even though Dez was stupid, we got it done. No coke anywhere. As much as I disliked intentionally throwing Dez under the bus, I was readily reminded that it was his idea to steal the drugs. I knew it was stupid, and if we walked away alive from that Halloween feast, I was going to make sure Dez realized that. In all honesty, though, it didn't seem like Cobra or Copperhead had any idea that we fell into a huge duffel bag of heroin. Whether or not we were dealing it outside of our designated area didn't seem to matter. Cobra gripped my shoulder with his giant hand and dug his nails into me.
Besides, Reynolds, you would never betray or steal from me. There is no way you could possibly be that fucking stupid. Especially after burning down my home and killing a bunch of my brothers.
He scanned me one last time, making sure I was telling the truth. There was no coke, Cobra. I promise. His hand regressed to its less intimidating pat.
That's what I figured,
he said.
No one is that dumb.
With a mouthful of runny instant pasta, Bate finally spoke up. He's pretty fucking stupid. He has a Batman tattoo. Cobra pounded his fist on the table as he erupted in laughter.
I do like the whore, Reynolds. Don't make me kill her.
After we finished dinner and said our goodbyes, Egon escorted us home. Not one word was said and the radio was off. Halfway home, the silence was lifted by the buzzing of my cell phone. Cobra had sent me the pictures of Des and Copperhead. Good evening. This is Jason Hill, host of the Horror Hill podcast. You've been listening to a chapter from the award-winning novel Knuckle Supper by best-selling author Drew Stepek. Knuckle Supper, Ultimate Gutter Fix Edition, and its critically acclaimed sequel, Knuckle Balled, are available now from Bloodbound Books. Check out the links in the video description and sticky comments below to pick up a copy today and show your support for indie horror. Also, please consider making a donation to Children of the Night today and help end teen prostitution and human trafficking. Children of the Night is a privately funded non-profit organization established in 1979 with the specific purpose of providing intervention in the lives of children who are sexually exploited and vulnerable to, or involved in, prostitution and pornography. Visit childrenofthenight.org for more information today. From author Drew Stepek and all of us here at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, thanks for listening and for your support.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.